Video, we're going to create a simple calculator using JavaFX. So we're going to build a graphical program that uses text fields, labels, and buttons to create a simple calculator. Now, before we start, I need you to know that I'm using a pre-release version of Java 8 and a developer build of Eclipse. Java 8 at the time of recording has not officially been released yet, and Eclipse, the latest releases of Eclipse, don't support Java 8 either. We need them for Lambda support because Lambdas are a new language construct which is added in Java 8. So I'm using pre-release versions of Java and a developer build of Eclipse to get this support. Now hopefully by the time you see this video, Java 8 will have been officially released and Eclipse support updated, so you will have nothing to worry about. I just need you to know that this is what I'm doing in case we run into any kind of issues with Eclipse. But anyway, let's get started. What we're going to have by the end of this video is a JavaFX program that is a calculator. So what we're going to do is have two text fields for the user to enter two numbers. So we're going to have a label here, so number 1, and then a text box, and then number 2 and another text box, and then result, and then another text box. And then down the bottom we're going to have 4 buttons for plus, minus, multiply, and divide. And so what will happen is the user enters the numbers that they want to calculate into here, so 5 and 3, and then hit one of these buttons, and when they press the button the result will appear in here. So for example, 5 times 3 is 15, so we get the result when they press this button. We're not going to color it like this, I'm just doing that to illustrate it. So let's get started. In Eclipse we will create a new project. And this is important because I'm using a later version of Eclipse, I can press Java project now and JavaFX just works. So what we're going to do is call this simple calculator. And to this project we will also add a Java class called simple calculator. Okay, I'll give us some room here. What we're going to do is make our class extend from JavaFX's application. Oops, there we go. And now we're going to implement our start method. Okay, now what we're going to do in here to begin with is get our buttons and text fields set up. So what we want is for these to be nicely horizontally spaced. So we're going to create a flow pane for this. And we'll just call it pane and use the default constructor. Next up, we'll set the gap to give us some spacing between our components. So pane.set horizontal gap, and we'll set it equal to 2. Okay, next up we're going to create our 3 text fields for our entry and for our result. So these are just text field objects, and I'll call this tf number 1 default constructor because we don't want any values in to start with. Oops, no space there. And 1 for our result. Next up, we're going to set the preferred column count of our text field. So in other words, how many characters it kind of expects to be entered. So we do this like this. tf number 1 dot set preferred okay. This isn't coming up because we've messed up one of our imports. So what I'm going to do is delete that and then press Control Space over here again, and see, we don't want Java AWT's text field, we want JavaFX text field. So now we can do this. So set preferred column count. And we're going to set this to 3. So then we're going to copy and paste this line 2 more times for our other 2 text fields. Okay, now what we're going to do is add these to our pane, and as we go we're also going to label them using label nodes. So what we're going to do is get our children that belong to the pane. Remember, this returns a list that we can then modify, so we're going to call add all. And what we're going to pass in first is a new label for our first number, and then tf number 1. Then what we're going to do is copy and paste this for number 2 and result. Number 2 and result. We also need to make sure we're adding our result text field. Okay, so now we've added all of our text fields to a pane, and we've also labeled them using labels. We didn't need to store these as variables because we never plan on modifying them or accessing their values. Next up, we're going to add our buttons. So to do this, we're going to create a horizontal box to put them all in. So we need hbox, and we'll call this hbox. And we're going to use the constructor that takes in a double, which is the spacing. So we're going to put in a spacing of 5, again to give us some more room. Next up, we're going to create our 4 buttons. So button, again, make sure we import the correct one. We'll call this bt add. Put the string in. I'm going to copy and paste this 3 more times. This one will be called bt subtract, bt multiply, and bt divide. Update the strings that get displayed. Okay, next up we're going to set the alignment of our horizontal box. So hbox dot set alignment, and we're going to set this to pos dot center. Okay, now we're going to add all 4 of our buttons all at once. So again, hbox dot get children dot add all. bt add, bt subtract, bt multiply, and bt divide. Okay, so what we're going to do now is add our 2 panes, our horizontal box and our flow pane, to a scene. Sorry, before we do that, we need to add, I got a little bit ahead of myself. We need a container to store our 2 panes in. So what we're going to do is create a border pane. And we'll call this border pane. Default constructor, what we're going to do is set the pane that contains our text fields to the center of the window or of the pane, and the buttons along the bottom. So border pane dot set center to be our pane, and set bottom, oops, wrong one, to be our hbox. Now we're going to create a scene and add our border pane to that. And we'll set our window size to 250 by 150. Next up, we'll set up our stage and get the window on screen. Okay, so what we're going to do now, oops, I'll just press Control Space here to get our import done for us. So now what we'll do is quickly create our main method to get this thing on the screen. And call launch. Okay, save that and run it. And we can see that we've got our very simple calculator displayed on the screen. Now, the problem is that our window size isn't quite big enough simply because of the massive borders that Windows 8 uses. So we have our two text fields that we can enter numbers in. Our buttons don't do anything yet, so let's attack that now. This is a good start. So what we're going to do is, in the bottom of our start method, create some action listeners to listen for when the buttons are pressed, and we need to do this for each of our buttons. So let's start with the add button, bt add.set on action. Now we're going to use a lambda to simplify the code for this. So the syntax for this is E, which becomes our event, and then the little arrow sign, which is a minus and then a greater than symbol. And then we have an opening block of code, and then what we're going to do is set the result to the calculation that we're about to do. So we get our result text field, tf result, and we set the text of it. Okay, so what we need to do is get our two numbers from the two text fields. These will be strings because text fields store strings. We need to convert these to numbers, then do the calculation. So what we're going to do is called double.parseDouble, and then it will be tf number1.getText. So we get the text of our first text field and then convert it to a double. And then because we're doing an addition, we have the plus symbol. And then what we do is do the same thing with our second number. So double.parseDouble tf number2.getText. Like that. Now, what is this complaining about? This is complaining because we haven't got a string now. We've got a double in here, and our set text expects a string parameter. Luckily, we can get around this using a shortcut that is just what Java does by using the string concatenation operator with an empty string. So now, this number gets calculated and then appended to this, well, prepended to this empty string, and we get a string in our parameter, which is perfect. So now, if I run this again, let's put in something simple, 3 and 5. When I press add, we get 8.0. It's displaying 0.0 because it's a double that we've returned, but it's giving us the right answer. So now we can copy and paste these lines of code for our other 3 buttons. Alright, so let's do subtract. All that needs to happen is we change the operator here to a minus sign. Oops, wrong minus sign. This is what happens when you've got an operator that means 2 different things. We want that one. Again, change this to a multiply, change this to a divide. So now when we run this, again, let's put in something simple, 4 and 4, add 8, correct, that should be 0, 4 minus 4 is 0, 4 multiplied by 4 is 16, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So you can see our calculator works. So with that, that's it for this video. We've looked at using lambdas for creating handlers for our buttons. We've used text fields, buttons, and labels, and a bunch of different panes for laying out our windows, and we've created a simple calculator. So that's it for this video. Thanks a lot.